If you live in a democracy, you've probably felt the frustration. You watch the news and see endless legislative gridlock, better polarization, and a political system that frequently seems paralyzed by debate. Then you look across the globe at centralized authoritarian systems, and the contrast is stark. A decision is made, and an entire skyscraper shoots up in a fraction of the time it takes a democracy to hold a public hearing. The physical results are undeniable. Entire cities emerge almost overnight when vast resources are instantly directed toward national modernization, operating free from bureaucratic friction. It raises an uncomfortable question. If democracy is the ultimate political achievement, why do regimes built on concentrated power often seem so much more capable of rapid, decisive action? The problem with how we usually compare these systems is that we judge them at their absolute best, imagining an ideal, visionary leader who knows exactly what to build and when to build it. Political scientists take a different approach. They evaluate government structures not by the personalities in charge, but by treating them as complex information processing systems. Since every human leader eventually makes a terrible decision, a state's survival depends on its embedded mechanics for catching and fixing those mistakes. Rather than looking at how fast a government pours concrete, we have to look at how effectively it identifies its own blunders before they trigger a collapse. Authoritarian speed comes from what researchers call state capacity. It's the centralized power to bypass local opposition, environmental reviews, and the courts to allocate labor and money instantly. Historically, this unconstrained power has yielded massive results. It allowed nations like the Soviet Union and modern China to pivot from largely agricultural societies into global industrial heavyweights, achieving this transformation in decades instead of centuries. This kind of top-down, directed growth is highly effective when mobilizing for a war, recovering from a natural disaster, or lifting millions out of poverty. But directing growth from the top down is very different from generating it. Sustained prosperity requires decentralized innovation, entrepreneurs and scientists who have the freedom to experiment, fail, and challenge conventional wisdom. Erasing political friction gives a state explosive short-term momentum, but it also strips away the essential guardrails needed to keep the government from steering the entire country off a cliff. When those guardrails vanish, centralized regimes face a fatal software bug. Political scientists call it the dictator's dilemma. Imagine being a local official in a system where absolute power sits at the top. You quickly learn that delivering good news gets you promoted, while reporting failures can get you imprisoned. This flowchart maps information traveling in a strict hierarchy. When a policy fails on the ground, red error points at the bottom are hidden. As data moves up the chain of command, middle management actively suppresses the negative details, artificially flipping them into successes. The pyramid apex receives only green data points, triggering a massive policy wave directed back down the hierarchy. By the time reports reach the leader, the dataset is divorced from reality. The ruler issues sweeping mandates based on a sterilized, inaccurate picture. And the cycle compounds. The flawed policy hits the ground and creates a massive cluster of new red errors. Because open criticism is dangerous, those failures are trapped, turning solvable local issues into catastrophic national disasters. By prioritizing total control, centralized regimes sacrifice accurate systemic feedback. They engineer a structure that makes them structurally blind to their own impending failures. Democracy approaches this exact same problem from the opposite direction. Instead of suppressing bad news, it relies on a messy, highly sensitive early warning system. Journalists investigate corruption, experts publish dissenting opinions, and citizens actively protest failed policies. It's an unstoppable distribution of critical information that forces the state to see its own flaws. Constantly processing this high volume of negative feedback, public outrage, and debate is exactly why democratic governance feels so exhausting and slow to watch. That friction serves as a vital diagnostic test, forcing the government to course-correct its trajectory before mistakes compound. Eventually, every system hits a final structural stress test, the inevitable moment when the central leader becomes undeniably incompetent, incapacitated, or aged. In personalized autocracies, this moment exposes extreme vulnerability. Without a formal, reliable exit mechanism, a failing ruler triggers dangerous power vacuums and elite infighting that can destabilize the entire nation. This is where democracy introduces its most important structural tool, utilizing the ballot box to execute a bloodless revolution. Citizens hold the overriding power to peacefully fire a failing administration. No civil wars, no violent coups, just an organized reset of the system's leadership. Democracy endures because it assumes human failure is inevitable and builds the escape hatch directly into the foundation of the state. Over time, the ability to remove the wrong leaders matters more than the speed of the right ones.